G'day, how's it going? Aviation Photography here, back with another video, and today we're looking at aviation air shows and what no one ever tells you. And I'll kick this off with physical fitness. Sounds a bit strange, but bear with me. It's a big advantage to have some physical fitness when you're doing air show photography. The camera gear for air shows is heavy. You have the camera body, which is usually pretty light. In my case, I've got the Canon R6 Mark II. But then you need to add your glass. So again, in my case, I've got the Tamron 150 to 600 mm lens, and because that's an EF lens and I've got an RAAF camera, I've also got to add in the adapter that I have for that lens to attach to my camera. And when I add up the weight for all of this, it comes to just a tick over 2.9 kilos, which is somewhere around the 5.5, 6 pounds, I think, in the other language. But nearly 3 kilograms, that's quite a bit to carry around for a whole day. Now that telephoto lens is not only heavy, but it's also long, which puts extra pressure. People will say, well, you're an adult male, you should be able to carry around something that's about 3 kilograms. Plus you got the shoulder strap to help you out, take some of the weight. And while that's all true, it doesn't help across the length of time that we're looking at when we're talking about an air show. So it's that cumulative effect of that weight. It's not the actual weight itself. Yep, look, pick this up, throw it around, no problems at all. It's not that heavy, but walk around with a 3 kilogram dumbbell in your hand all day and then tell me that doesn't become heavy. When you look at an air show, most of them kick off around about 10 o'clock for the flying displays, that is, then go to about 3 o'clock. So roughly about 5 hours of aircraft flying past you, and for you having to pick up your camera, move it around, track planes, that sort of stuff, take your photos. So 5 hours of it becomes an issue. Therefore, my suggestion is to try to keep yourself relatively fit to allow you to be able to manage that weight. Obviously, good idea to keep fit anyway, so bonus if you are fit for doing your photography work. While on the topic of trying to maintain a level of fitness for carrying the camera gear all day, let's talk about actually getting the shots. Planes at an air show tend to move across your front, either from right to left or left to right, depending on the previous pass. Sometimes they will come from behind or in front of you, depending on what sort of display is going on, but most of the time you're tracking across in front of you from the right to the left or the left to the right. All of this requires you to be able to maintain the track of the aircraft. Either you're keeping up with a fast jet, or you're trying to pan perfectly with a prop-driven plane or helicopter where the shutter speed is slowed down to a point where the movement of your lens needs to match that of the aircraft so that you're able to produce quality in-focus shots without motion blur. And by that, looking at the plane I've got here, obviously I want the motion blur in the background and I want some blur on the props, but I want the actual aircraft itself, just like on this example here, to be nice and sharp and in focus. This all requires a steady base and the ability to be able to move the top half of your body to track the aircraft. So along with requiring more strength than you may think, you also need to maintain flexibility. If you're constantly shifting your feet to allow your upper body to turn and keep balance, you're likely to lose track of the aircraft you're photographing and end up with unusable shots. Apart from that, you're not alone at an air show. It can often be quite crowded around you and you're already dealing with a pretty long barrel on your lens. If you're also shifting your weight to stay balanced, you have a better than average chance of knocking into other air show spectators. I can assure you that most of the time that will be politely dealt with if it's once or twice, but if it's a constant, it's likely to end up in something that's anything but a polite interaction. So I like to keep my spine flexibility so that I can maintain that strong base and keep myself steady throughout the air show. So when I'm taking my photos, I like to plant my feet, usually straight on, and then because the aircraft's either coming from the right or left, move my whole upper body to face the aircraft coming in, and keeping my feet on the ground, follow that aircraft and twist the top half of the body to follow that aircraft. That way I maintain that really solid base and I'm not going to be running into people. Now, everybody will tell you to bring lenses, spare batteries, extra memory cards, all that sort of stuff. And that's all great advice, and I'd say the same. But something that can be easily overlooked is a sunscreen. You're out in the weather for pretty much the entire day with your head tilted skywards, and for at least half of that time your face is pointed at the sun. It may be winter or autumn, but the sun can still leave its mark. Believe me on this one, I know from experience. Leaving the sunscreen at home or in the car is a bad move. During the Warbirds over Wanaka airshow, which took place in late March 2024 in New Zealand, I did this. I forgot the sunscreen. I figured it was autumn, it wasn't a particularly hot day, I'd be right. But I was wrong. Living in Australia, I'm used to the effects of the sun, so I tend to cover up. Now, I should have known better. I don't know, for whatever reason, whether it was because I was on holidays and wasn't worrying about things as much as I usually would. I just didn't bother doing anything about leaving that sunscreen behind. And I can tell you, I paid for that little mistake for the next few days. The very next day, I did one of the jet boat tours, and all I could feel was the wind as the boat sped along, drying out my skin even more. It led to me end up having to buy a bottle of aloe vera gel and a broad-brimmed hat, and wearing that for the rest of the trip to keep the sun off my face. It was definitely not a nice experience, so remember the sunscreen. It's one of the first things packed for me, and I have that sunscreen now permanently clipped onto my camera bag so I can't forget it. The next thing I'll talk about is dust on your lens. So dust on your lens is a big issue at most air shows. I always clean my gear before setting out for a day's photography. Most of the time when I'm walking along trails and capturing landscapes or birds or waterfalls, that tends to be enough. I get home, transfer the photos, and all's good with the world. But what I've noticed about photographing at an air show is as the day wears on, I seem to gather more and more dust specks on my lens, and therefore my photos. So probably something to do with all the aircraft going past, blowing up dust. But yeah, it tends to end up on my lens, and obviously leaves dust marks that just don't look good, and I've got to try and get rid of. When I first started out, this meant I was using the visualize spots and healing tool quite a lot from Lightroom, and as I got further and further into the day's photos, I had to use that more and more. As a result, I now carry in my bag a microfiber cloth so that I can give the lens a little wipe down at regular intervals. I try to remember to do this after every aircraft finishes its display. That way I'm not missing anything, and I limit the need for the healing tool. Next thing we'll look at is the number of photos that you take and what that means once you get back from the airshow. So if you're used to photographing stationary things like landscapes, waterfalls, or anything where burst mode isn't really required, you probably get home and have a few photos to go through to pick the keepers out of the bunch. You may have a couple of hundred on an eventful outing. Aviation photography at an airshow is a little different. It's especially different if you have a camera with a high frames per second capability, much like the R6 Mark II. And it does make a difference. I used to use the 700D, and the number of photos that I could take in a second or in a burst is much more with the R6 Mark II. So if you do have a camera that has that high frames per second capability, before you know it, you're no longer looking at a couple of hundred photos, but thousands. I think my record for an air show is just north of 7,000. Depending on what you're shooting and the settings you're capturing the subject with, this could mean that you have a lot that aren't up to standard and are being binned. However, it takes time to go through so many photos and select the ones that you are going to keep and edit. I've found since moving to the R6 Mark II and through refining my technique that the number of photos I take and the number of keepers I have has gone up due to the camera's capabilities to take more shots per second and my ability to track an aircraft effectively. So my percentage of keepers has gone up. I can have between 500 and 1,000 photos that are in focus, capture the subject well, and are ones that I want to either edit or at least keep. With my previous camera, I didn't have the same photos per second being captured, and I had a lower percentage of keepers. All of this led to less photos to edit. So where I might have between 500 to 1,000 that I want to at least keep, with my previous camera I'd have maybe 100 to 150 photos. Editing 100 to 150 photos still takes quite some time to complete, but it's nothing like doing 500 to 1,000. So having the high number of edit-worthy photos, I'm editing for weeks after an air show, which is why sometimes it takes me such a long time to get my photos up, or I will put them up in batches basically. As I finish the editing of a particular type of aircraft, I might put the photos up for people to see, then move on to the next aircraft type. So I'm editing for weeks after an air show, and this is something you need to be prepared for. It's great to be at the air show and enjoy capturing the aircraft as they fly by, but you need to be pretty enthusiastic about editing as well. The editing is what takes me the most time, and even though I quite enjoy it, it begins to drag on after more than a week. To recap, be prepared for these things that others don't usually tell you. Try to stay fit and flexible. It's not going to just help your photography, it's going to help you in life in general. Always take your sunscreen with you, no matter what time of the year it is, and be prepared for what comes after the air show. And here's a little bonus tip for you. It's brought about through experience again. Always check the food you eat at an air show. My wife bought me a bacon and egg roll when at the Wanaka air show, and when I bit into it, the egg was so runny it ran down my fingers and onto my camera. What she'd failed to inform me was she got the roll from a vendor that claimed to have the runniest egg yolks. Now, I was picking egg out of the crevices of my camera for a year afterwards. Now, that's one you probably don't have to worry about, but I'd wager it's one no one has ever told you before. So that'll do it for this particular video. Remember, if you like what you're seeing, please like, comment and subscribe. It really helps the channel out. And I'll see you in the next one.